All right, well, we'll see how this goes. First time for everything.
Wow.
Got the gavel.
I'll call to order the study session of Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. It is 7 p.m. Monday, November 5th. At this time, I'd like to remind everyone to please sign in and silence their cell phones. I'd also like to remind our visitors that in order to facilitate an effective meeting, we ask those who wish to make comments to the board read the visitor guidelines found on the table right outside the door and complete the attached public participation form and bring those to Dr. Hall. Dr. Hall, roll call, please.
Giles.
Here.
Raver.
Here.
Henricks.
Here.
Cassim.
Here.
Larson. Here. There are 5 present and 2 absent.
Okay. Stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, everyone's had a chance to see the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Dr. Henricks?
Second.
Mr. Giles? Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Larson.
Yes.
Henricks.
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Raver.
Yes.
Cassim.
Yes.
Are there any public participation forms?
I don't have any, no.
Okay. All right. Well, we will get an update from our instructional and behavioral coaches.
I'm going to do a quick introduction, but you can come on up. We're fortunate this evening to have 3 folks who are occupying new positions in our district, and then Lauren Pratt is our behavior interventionist, and she took the place of Megan Hunter when Megan moved into the assistant principal's job at Lincoln Trail. And so we thought it would be a good idea to bring the board up to speed on what they spend their very busy days doing and how they're supporting our teachers. And I think you'll find this to be really interesting and informative. I want to introduce each person that's here tonight. First of all, Marissa Hill. Marissa has been a special education teacher in our district for a really long time because I'm pretty sure I hired her the first go-round.
You were 12.
And yeah, and Marissa Hill has worked at the junior high and here at Middletown Prairie. And we found that due to some special ed numbers, we would be able to move her into the position that she occupies this year instead of being a case manager. And so she is one of our coaches working with teachers. As I said, Lauren Pratt is our behavior interventionist. I have had the good fortune of not only being Lauren's junior high principal, but also working with her for 5 years over in Morton, where Lauren was a social worker. And so we were thrilled to hire her back here in Mahomet, her hometown. Caitlin Megason-Dickin is our 6th through 12th grade instructional coach, and we were very, very fortunate to hire Caitlin away from the Danville schools. And so she's been working with our 6th through 12th grade teachers. And then Kim Johnson is a familiar face, having been a 3rd grade teacher here for a number of years. And Kim was ready to try something new and has moved into our K-5 instructional coaching position this year. All 4 people just doing a tremendous job, each bringing different talents and expertise to the position, but just making incredible teams. And so again, I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin and Kim to start off, and then we'll hear from Marissa and Lauren. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. So we just wanted to start by explaining, well, ourselves, but we can kind of skip over this part. But anyway, so that's fine. So I'm Caitlin. Like Dr. Hall said, I taught at Danville School Districts for 8 years. I have a master's in curriculum instruction, endorsement, teacher leadership, and probably the most challenging is the 18-month-old. Just chasing her around.
Well, I've taught for over 30 years here. I have my master's in educational policy, organization, and leadership, but I have 2 successful children, or 2 products of Mahomet-Seymour that are my children out in the world now. So we're going to start about we're going to explain to you what coaches do, and think of this type of coach that might take someone really important from where they are to where they want to be. And that's what we try to do, to take our teachers from where they are right now, talk to them and make them feel comfortable with us, and try to support them in any way they need supported to take them to where they want to go, what they want to grow in. I think changing the climate of Mahomet-Seymour to wrap their brains around this type of position is going to be our first challenge, and I think we've already kind of tackled that. I think that teachers really often are in their own worlds, not having a lot of time to collaborate with others, and maybe sometimes they chat at recess or chat during their lunch with their coworkers, but as coaches, we can offer that support of just listening to them and bouncing around ideas and offering any resources that we know of, but most importantly, giving them time to just talk and reflect about what's going on in their classrooms. So shifting their thinking to trust us and be okay with trying new things, and even if they fail, to try again, and the reflection pieces is what we're all about, is building that trusting relationship. So instructional coaching is directed by the coachee. Right now, they're the ones that come to us and say, we would like help with getting our guided readings up, or we would like help with some technology in our classrooms, or whatever. So it's directed by them. We stay neutral. We're not there to judge or evaluate them in any way. Hopefully that helps them trust us. We really question them in such a way that really helps them hopefully self-direct their own learning and come to their own conclusions. Coaching is a skillful application of tools for planning, reflecting, and problem solving. And finally, it's developing and building internal resources. And here's a quote from Jim Knight, who was a famous cognitive coach, which we've all been through his training. When teachers stop learning, so do students. So we're here to just continue the teachers' learning by supporting them.
And part of that is changing from like a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And this is what we try to instill in our kids all the time, right? Like, you're not good at math or bad at math. You are going to be good at math, or you're going to get better at math. It's not like, oh, I can't do fractions, you know, it's just something you have to work on. So we're trying to shift from these are my kids, those are your kids, to these are our kids, right? To having this collaborative atmosphere where teachers not only trust us, but trust each other in the classrooms. And we start that by posing these questions to them. We try not to provide answers. We try to just pose the questions so that they're finding the answers by themselves. And that way we find it is much more authentic and sticks better, right? It's one thing to do my suggestion or Kim's suggestion, but it feels a lot more real, and the teachers are more likely to do it more often or do it for a longer period if it's theirs, right? So we want them to have ownership in that. Okay, so part of that is trying to get them to take the leap with us. So one of our big initiatives that we have started are peer observations. So part of this is covering classes for teachers so that they're able to go into another classroom and see the great works that, that their colleagues are doing. Then we reflect with them afterwards. What did you see? What did you like? What can you implement in your class? What are some things that kind of reaffirmed who you are as a teacher? And so through this, there is a growth process and a trust process This has been 100% voluntary. We don't want to force anyone into doing this. We're just trying to, like I said, like Kim said, like establish this culture. So this has been really great for our first round. It's been really fantastic, and we have more signed up for future sessions. So we will most likely have another round before the end of the semester, and then continue it into next semester or next year, and just hopefully grow along the way.
Sometimes they go in alone and then come back and reflect with us. Sometimes we go with them and we're talking in each other's ears as we're watching what's going on in the classroom. But it's really the conversation following the observation that's so important.
Okay. So, and just to go along with that, this is from the University of Leicester in England. So peer observations really can be the heart of this collaborative culture, because we don't want to be looked at as just problem solvers, like, oh, we got sent in because so-and-so's a mess, or they need help with this, right? We want to be seen as a support, as a resource, but we want them to see themselves as support and resources as well. So part of that is just facilitating the time to talk with each other and have these conversations with each other, to experience what other classrooms are like, both vertically and horizontally. So if I'm a 7th grade teacher, I can see what the 8th grade teachers are doing, which isn't always possible because of planned times and breaks and things like that, different lunches. So we're trying to create both this vertical time for teachers, but also to see other reading groups, how they're run, other math groups, or you know, how they even teach different subjects in Algebra 1. We also have coaching cycles. So this is, again, another cycle that we go through. It's not a one-off process. This is continual. So we start with a planning meeting. Again, like seeing where the teachers want to go. What is their goal? What do we want to focus on? This could be looking at data for, I'm not really sure if I'm implementing my reading groups and I'm getting the results that I want, or the kids are getting enough out of it. To looking at how long transitions last. To looking at, I had a teacher ask me, I just want to make sure I'm calling on everybody twice. I want to get to everybody twice. And I want to make sure that I'm including everybody in it. I've had other teachers ask me for how they're looking at formative assessments. Am I getting the most out of my students, the most information? So we look at those goals, and then we come up with a solution. So we either have a co-taught lesson where we're teaching together with the teacher. Sometimes we model different strategies, or we observe, just simply observe and collect data along the way. But probably the most important piece then is the reflection afterwards. So that's when we go over all of that with the teacher. How did it go? How do you think it went? And what can we do in the future? So this is something that we have started with several teachers. And again, a completely voluntary basis, but I think as word spread, I know I'm certainly getting busier with requests for coaching cycles, which is fantastic.
We've tried to really encourage coaching cycles with our brand new staff, but fortunately our brand new staff isn't so brand new. A lot of our new hires have come to us with experience. So I think it really helps when someone who's experienced and amazing asks for a coaching cycle, and then their friends are not so hesitant to do so. So that's been a great outcome. Another thing we do is we try to do some co-planning with teachers that maybe need help planning certain lessons. And we also do some co-teaching, as she said. And again, the change happens when they're planning and doing, but mostly in reflection. I know in the K-5 building, some new initiatives like Jan Richardson's guided reading has been really difficult for a lot of people to tackle and implement with fidelity. So a lot of co-planning has been taking place planning those lessons. And just having a teacher co-teach with a coach, which I've done quite a few times, promotes that follow-up reflection. One thing that a lot of teachers go to a lot of professional development. I know this is maybe hard to see, but this is a slide I really think is important. But often they don't actually implement the ideas of the professional development that they go to see. So if you look at this slide, this really, I think, proves why coaching is so valuable. If some teachers are given just the theory in some professional development, the presenter maybe just explains the content, they're going to gain about 10% of the knowledge. They'll attain about 5% of that, but about 0% will transfer actually to the classroom practice. So any professional development that's out there that people just sit and listen to and then go back to their classrooms is probably not going to transfer to the classroom. The second row, if they go to a professional development where demonstration is added to the presentation, 30% is retained in the knowledge. They might gain 20% of the skills, but again, 0 transfer to the classroom. If practice is added to the professional development, they add a lot to their knowledge base, 60% knowledge, 60% skill attainment, but only 5% transfers to what they really do in the classroom. But if you have a coach coming around following professional development saying, do you have all the materials you need? Do you need me to help you sort through some data? Do you want some help co-teaching and planning? They really retain the knowledge by 95% and gain a lot of skill, and 99% transfers into the classroom. And I think we saw that last year when we did a lot of professional development on this Jan Richardson, and we weren't seeing it really showing up in the classroom. But this year when we had coaches going around making sure it was happening, almost everyone's on board now, so. Is this the next one?
No. There you go.
Is that you?
No.
That's me. One other thing we do is collaboration days, pod collaborations, where a small group of teachers come together every week, and as coaches and administration, we sit down with them and talk again about what are some things you want to work on, how can we help you, and they have time to talk about those things. That's something that teachers have never been given before, is that time to talk and plan together. And so again, it's making that culture of working together more doable. And every week too, teams of teachers as a grade level meet at the K through 5 level, and we try to attend as many of those meetings as we can. I don't know how that works at the high school.
Junior high has team time.
Okay. Collaboration, 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 right?
So other things that we have worked on this year. So I know, like with going 1-to-1 6 through 12, there's been a lot of technology questions. And so what's been great is that I can meet teachers on their plan times. I can meet them up before school. I can meet them after school. Like whenever they're free, I can be there. Lessons and strategies, like Kim mentioned with Jan Richardson, or math groups. We also, like the junior high this year, was the first time that they were doing their own math testing. So there's a lot of troubleshooting with that and training on that, as well as some new technology programs like Go Guardian, where they're using to monitor student behavior online. We also have implemented monthly meetings with new teachers and our mentors to make sure that they're on the same page, they're getting the support that they need, and kind of addressing some timely issues. We've implemented some book studies with the other coaches and sub-trainings to get them in the classroom, especially like with the baby boom this year, trying to make sure we have something
subs to cover.
And then also with our staff learning opportunities website, our PD website, collecting online resources, webinars, or any pertinent with the vertical alignment teams, any great resources there. We're collecting that, posting that online, sending that to the teachers to make sure that they're aware of those.
So finally, this first year, it's a new idea. It's kind of a dance. Trying not to intrude too much, but gain some trust and help as we can. And from one of our favorite shows, we just want them to pick us and choose us and love us.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I guess I've got a question. You know, you mentioned from beginning to end about the trust issue. You know, how do you feel like that's going? Because I know a lot of times it is difficult for people to admit they want help, need help, be seen getting help when maybe their peers aren't. So how's that going?
Well, I am often reminding them that this is not part of your evaluation. I'm not here to talk to your evaluator about anything we're talking about. Just take some risks, and I feel like it's getting through. I think we still have a way to go though. And like I said too, when really strong, respected teachers are using us and working with us, it really encourages some teachers that may really need to work with us to step forward.
Asking for help is a sign of strength.
Right?
You mentioned changing culture a couple times, and what sort of goals do you throw at that? How do you know that's working?
So I think when we see, or when we will see teachers collaborating without us facilitating that, like when, and we see that, you know, in pockets, and but I think when teachers are collaborating with each other and, hey, will you help me grade these assessments, or let's blind grade these to make sure that there's that inter-rater reliability. And they're taking those steps on their own or not. I think sometimes that there's a little bit of a competitive atmosphere in some places. Like, oh, my kids did really well on this test. My kids are gonna do better than your kids on this test. And so we're trying to kind of negate that and mitigate that. So, so that it's like, no, our kids did do really well. Or if my kids didn't do so well, what did you do that was different? And teach me about that so that next time, you know, my kids will be there too.
I think as we keep records too of how many coaching cycles we go through and how successful they've been, and how many peer observations we've covered, and how successful the change that those teachers desired happened, will also be an indicator if we're changing this culture.
What is your expectation of the amount of coaching cycles one might go through? I have no idea, so I'm just curious.
How many would
Yeah,
one
like
person
you
go
said,
through?
Right, you said,
Well,
you know, it just depends on how many coaching cycles. I was just curious, like, what is
We
that
originally
expectation?
thought that with our brand new teachers, we would at a minimum have one coaching cycle before December and one in the spring.
How long is a cycle?
Well, it depends. I mean, let's go back to that slide.
So usually the planning can take several meetings to get a plan together. So it's not just like one 30-minute session and then you're done, because you have to really set it up for success. The lesson or observation, like I'm working on a project with a teacher, so it's several days that we've been planning, and it's several days to get this project together. And I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be really great in the end. But it's going to take us maybe a couple weeks to do it to finality.
And I'm in a coaching cycle now that first time through, the goal wasn't met. So it's like another cycle of it, another cycle of it, you know. So it depends, I guess, on the goal and the teacher and how motivated they are. And yeah.
But it's mostly directed by their showing that initiative of directing.
Right now it
that they
is.
want
Now
that.
I understand there are schools where there's required coaching sessions, but I think that would almost go against our idea of changing this trust culture.
Sure.
So how long do you think it'll take to have any type of hard data that shows, you know, this has, you know, obvious results? And then, I don't know if that's even possible. But
Do you mean like quantitative data?
yeah, well, ideally, but I realize that might be pretty difficult to especially when there's different, everybody has different goals. It's not like everybody's doing the exact same. I mean,
if you're looking at new school initiatives, I can tell you right now, the coaching has already made a difference in implementing 2 new initiatives. But as far as personal goals, I don't know how long that would take to measure.
But we would have qualitative data. So one thing we do after coaching cycles is that we have an exit slip of sorts for teachers. So we do have that data of like, was your goal met? What was your goal? How what could make, and then I put on mine like just what could make the coaching more effective, or how could I help more, just to be a little bit self-reflective as well. But so that kind of qualitative data is there. But as far as like in like MAP scores or things like that, I don't know. Maybe with the reading and new math initiatives, we would see some there.
I just went to a coaching conference about a week ago. And it was a theme there that if you're new, if your building is new to this, if your district is new to this, it may take a couple of years for this to all be underway and working nicely, fully implemented.
When you hit that magic 2-year gong, that everything's now gone well, so how do you determine how to reset new objectives after that 2 years?
Best practices are always being researched and new initiatives are always being introduced, and I think we'll always be pushing that and professionally developing the staff in whatever the newest best practices are. Every time a new textbook is adopted, that would be something we would support.
Realigning curricula when we're looking at the different subjects, when we're kind of reevaluating the curricula K through 12, and looking at that, we're right now looking at math and science, and science is probably going to adopt a new textbook, and so we'll have to look at that. How are we going to support these teachers in adopting these new resources? And it'll be the same next year or 2 years when we look at English and history, and it just keeps going.
And teachers are always going to want to be growing their craft.
you had a slide up about how much gets retained from like the professional development. Yeah, that was. So I don't know if this is a question for you or Dr. Hall or Wendy or Ryan on the spot, but do we need to relook at what we're doing for professional development? I mean, if someone's coming in and talking to our folks and they're not putting any of it in practice, is there a way to tie what you're doing, which I think sounds
That is what we're
great.
doing. Yeah. We follow up any professional development this year by support and.
Okay, so you're taking what's on the top and working it down.
Right,
to the
yeah,
top.
correct. So anybody who's going to professional development is following up, and we're,
Okay.
We've also not, just, what I've seen over the last year and so far this year, I mean, one of the maybe most entertaining but least effective forms of professional development is to have a keynote or, nothing wrong with high profile speakers, but they're not particularly effective in the long term, and just as this demonstrates. And so we've really looked kind of internally for professional development for the experts that we have on staff. And then Caitlin and Kim are able to support that this year through utilizing coaching cycles and supporting teachers in different ways, just depending on whatever is going on in their respective grade levels. For K-5, a huge focus is guided reading in 6 through 12, looking at math and science this year. But as Caitlin mentioned, moving ahead, Dr. Rummel has a kind of a 5-year vision of all the different areas that we need to review in terms of curriculum. So English and language arts is going to roll around, and then social studies at some point, and all those different areas. So I feel like we're really kind of making use of all of that, but coaching is really that piece that can really then make the shift to make that professional development be put to good use.
I think this slide would be a pretty good motivator for teachers to really utilize your skills.
So before we had this implemented in our school, what did the teachers do to get a more effective use out of their development? Did they have remote coaching before, or?
I think they would casually talk to their neighbor on recess duty about how they're implementing it, some idea, or have some coffee on the weekend and talk about it, but there was no plan to follow up for support. Yeah.
I was curious if there is before this was available, if a teacher was like, I need X, Y, and Z done, I'm not getting it from this presentation I went to. In other fields, you can hire a remote coach or you can hire a consultant to come in. And I was curious, have we had teachers do it that way? And are they now utilizing you as a different way of?
I think motivated teachers that want to try something new always find a way, and they dig for there have always been those types of people, but
I would say very few people turn to kind of outside coaches, which is probably more common in the private sector. And so what we want to see happen is shift the culture to where the coaching and having conversations with our coaches is just part of what teachers do, and it's just kind of the natural thing to request and ask for as they move through different parts of their different stages of their career, and when we implement new initiatives in the district.
I had a coaching or a peer observation today, and it was a very strong teacher observing another very strong teacher. And the conversation following that was very powerful, and she took away 2 really great ideas that she's going to put into her classroom now. And there's just a couple little tweaks, but teachers just haven't had that luxury of learning from one another, and hopefully that's going to change.
Clearly, there's some methodology that came up with these observations. Is there a way to translate that so we can get a local snapshot?
Yeah, there is. I can put together something probably. Yeah, in the year.
Maybe at the end of the year, is that what you're thinking, or at the end of 2 years?
Even longitudinally, it seems like if this is true, we should measure against that.
Absolutely, and we can. Yeah, I would suggest, at the end of 1 year, and then at the end of 2 years, and we can look at that data and see.
I mean, I can imagine if it stays true that number 1 and number 2 never meets the classroom, then why are we funding professional development at all? That's an extreme, but this says, why would we be doing that?
Well,
so how do we, as a board, fund? How do we make choices? How do we know when you're effective enough to keep this up or even expand it compared to what this suggests?
Can I say one thing really quick? There are some professionals in our school districts that do have to reach outside to other professionals, like myself. I have a background in school social work, and now I'm a behavior coach interventionist. So there are some in our district that I can pull from, but I do have to go to outside education to make sure I get my appropriate credits also, and because I can't pull from, there's only a certain number of people I can pull from the district. So I know that maybe that's speaking in the special ed aspect, but.
Well, Merle, I think and tell me if I've got this wrong, but I think the idea is those top 2 areas that on their own are not effective.
right.
If we layer in the coaching at the bottom, then it can make those top 2 effective.
Kind of like kinesthetic learning, you see, you hear.
I agree with all that, and I really like the specialty point that you've got there. We've got to go somewhere to learn something, but if we had a way to blend and improve that right column in all 4 categories, that would be good to know.
I don't think the goal is to improve all 4 categories. It just shows that if you combine all 4 rows together is where you get the biggest transfer.
think the other thing, just to point out, is that one of the reasons that we hired instructional coaches was because of the evidence-based funding model. And so instructional coaches and behavior interventionists are identified in the evidence-based funding model as having a significant effect size on teaching and learning. And so when we
Which they look at practice for.
and so looking at that, and then there's some other positions as we move toward adequacy in that funding model. There's some other positions that we want to add, but when we looked, I mean, we really didn't have these positions, so we were able to transform some existing positions into these positions, and then Caitlin's position was really just completely brand new, the 6th through 12th. And as was Kim's, but we used an existing position to transform it into the position that Kim occupies. So just in terms of research and in terms of what we know, the impact that coaching can have on instruction, that is tied in with the evidence-based model.
Do we know the measures that they used, the methodology, to give it that much emphasis?
Yeah, absolutely, but I don't have it in front of me.
No,
Otherwise I would whip that out and we could talk about
don't
it.
get me wrong, I support
Yeah.
all these efforts. So another curiosity, when you say that new initiatives are more successful with coaching, is that primarily what the coaching is targeted at? Or
Big
what was
chunk
the
of
result of?
what I do is support new initiatives.
Okay.
But
I think mostly, right now my days are filled with the one-to-one initiative and making sure that that's successful and making sure that teachers have the support they need in that, so that it's not, so that they're well used, right? We want them to be well used. And so I'm trying to take the fear away from that for some of them. And others, it's kind of highlighting the great things that they're doing with implementing. It shouldn't be another thing on their plate, right? Like, I'm trying to work with them on that. So that would be my big thing. But even just best practices, like working with, like we talked about, transitions. Transitions have been a thing for teachers for, since the beginning of teaching. But that's still something that there's always room for improvement there. There's always room for growth there. Bell ringers, I just talked to a teacher today about having some procedures in place. And she's a really strong teacher, but we were just talking about her procedures and how to maybe solidify them a little bit more to help the students be a little bit more successful in her class. And so those aren't new initiatives, they're just best practices. But those are still ongoing conversation pieces.
I've got one last question. I think this is great, and I think our teachers can get a lot from it. The one thing that I see that could be an issue is, the teachers are so stressed for time. And maybe this is, again, more a question for Dr. Hall or Wendy or Ryan, but have we given any thought to any ways to maybe free up some time to where they can do the, have time for the pre-observation meetings and kind of the exit interviews and, I know you said you sometimes will go in and take their classrooms to help them.
But a lot of the pre-observation stuff and reflection afterwards is before or after school, and it does overload a teacher a little bit, but
So we try to take off anything that we can. So like in that planning meeting, okay, we need some research on something, we need some background information, you want me to make the activity and then you edit it. That's kind of, like I am a Parks and Recreation fan, I'm also from Pawnee, so I like to consider myself a Leslie Knope. Like I am, I will do the background work, I will pull the resources, I will do what we need to get done. So in that sense, we are taking from the plates of the teachers. And because we aren't tied to a classroom, which is fabulous, then we have the flexibility. Like
once in a while I'll say, do you have copies I can make for you? Can I put up this bulletin board for you?
Right.
Because we are taking some of their time to have these conversations.
One thing that we've all collaborated too is we think it's really good that the teacher observes another teacher with the coach side by side. So Wendy and I have signed up to take teachers' classrooms for a certain amount of time so they can have the observation and reflection piece all in one chunk. So that helps out.
So they're getting coached and you're helping them out.
That's
And for the first time in our K-5, they have collaboration as a pod built in to their day, where Kim attends with Ryan and I with a small pod of teachers that we take that sit and get professional development and then we embed it into their day and move it forward. So that's just one other way that every other week we're pushing it, but it's built into their day. It's not in addition to, it's actually time that 5 people at a time are freed up to meet with us. And at Lincoln Trail, same thing.
Same thing. Well, thanks for giving us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you for everything you've done.
I have one last thing, I'm so sorry. Dr. Rummel asked me to give you an update on Chromebook usage. So she wanted to make sure that kind of you were updated on the one-to-one initiative. So what I did is I sent out an anonymous form to all the teachers to get their feedback, both qualitative and quantitative. So I just asked how often they were using it, and 43% of our teachers were saying that they were using it several days a week, every few days, and 28% were using it every day. And I would say that if I polled them again, I think that more teachers are using it every day for at least one activity or bell ringers or something. And then I asked them what they were using it for, or the most common responses were assessments. There are tools like creating citations, pulling quotes from text, reading online texts, and research. A lot of teachers were using it for research. And then, oops, there it is. Okay, so I know this is kind of hard to see, but I wanted to put up a nice myriad of quotes from the teachers themselves, so how the Chromebook usage had impacted their teaching. So most teachers responded that the kids aren't losing the materials now. The kids have access to it 24/7. If they are sick and home, depending on the illness, of course, if it's you know, they can keep up with the class. They can keep up. We also have a teacher who records her lessons every day, and so she posts that automatically to Google Classroom, and then her students have access to that. So if they missed a piece they want to review, they have immediate access to that lesson. Some teachers talked about differentiation and how much easier it is to create those enrichment activities and have those available to students. And then also, of course, the copy limits came up a little bit with, it's a little easier to get those resources to students, and they're not having to worry about using the copies or even additional, if they wanted to put in an additional short story for our English teachers, or even differentiate the texts in that way, they are able to. And right now there's so many great free educational resources online and tools like Chrome extensions that they are able to use, so the teachers hit on that. But I really like one of the quotes in there says, it gives responsibility back to the students in many ways, and I really appreciated that. So.
Was the data from the entire district?
Just 6 through 12.
Just, okay.
Just 6 through 12.
How often will you ask the same questions?
I was gonna do it again at the end of the year. So 1 first semester, 1 second semester.
Okay.
And then impacted student learning, similar answers. I appreciated this as a former English teacher. Students will type more than they handwrite. So oftentimes this teacher is seeing more or better answers, I would say, in her writing, because there's a more of a willingness to type it out rather than handwrite their answers. But so students can research the content they want to know or they're interested in. It helps them pull more resources or answer questions. It says, I have had students ask questions that I may not know the answer to. I would then look it up at a later time to let the class know. Now students can look things up on their own and share with the class. But most teachers were very positive about it. So just a quick update on that.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, now Marissa and Lauren are give us an overview on how they spend their days.
Thank you very much.
On the other side. Do you have plenty of battery?
Yes. All right. Okay, well, Marissa and I named our presentation Coaching, Consulting, and Cheerleading. We kind of figured that encompassed a lot of what we do. Yes, we do all three. I answered behavior coach and interventionist, and Marissa is considered an instructional coach. I think our roles are kind of coaches with a twist. So we'll explain that a little bit as we go further on into our presentation.
Just a little bit about me. I have a master's in special ed focusing on special education curriculum, as well as a master's in education administration and leadership. I'm CPI trained, and I've also gone to the cognitive coaching trainings that Kim was talking about. It's my 15th year in the district. I spent 12 years in junior high. I helped start the life skills curriculum there with Rita Jackson 12 years ago, or 15 years ago. And I also spent 2 of those years doing 6th grade resource. And then I moved down to kindergarten and I did 2 years of kindergarten case management. So I've done all different grade levels. I've taught summer school most years before I was married and had kids. So I've pretty much covered all the ages. My husband's name's Joe and I have 2 little rotten children. Knox is 3 and Scarlett's 1. So.
Okay, so as Lindsay mentioned earlier, I'm an alum of our district. I graduated in 2012 from U of I with my master's in social work with a school concentration. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm also CPI certified, which gives us special skills to help de-escalate children and to intervene physically if that need does come up. I also was an aide while I was doing my graduate degree here in Mahomet. I was a school social worker for 6 years in Morton before I came here, and I'm doing similar work to what I was doing in Morton, so it's been a pretty good transition for myself. And this is my first year as a behavior coach here, and my husband's name is Tyler, and it's hard to miss, but I am due December 21st with our first child. And it's a girl. And just to preface you all, we do have a little humor in our presentation. They say that, you know, laughter and humor is a good coping mechanism,
So we like this, you know, you get coaching, everyone gets coaching, because I think it's important to recognize that special ed needs coaches too. If not for nothing else, but to help with the retention of special education teachers in our district. It's a very tough job. And the burnout rate, as we all know, is incredibly high. And going on, 16 years doing it myself, I feel like it's good to go around and give support to people that really need it. So a few things that we do in our coaching, we also have like the weekly or bi-weekly meetings with agendas driven by the teacher, very much so kind of like what Kim and Caitlin were talking about. We do work with both new and veteran teachers, but we also work with paraprofessionals as needed as well. So we do work with, all of the staff who work with our special education students. We consult not only on instructional practices, but also on behavior intervention and strategies. So that could be classroom management wide, or it could also be just for an individual child that teachers has concerns about. We also work with teachers on improving their data collection strategies, because data collection in special ed looks very different than data collection does with the general education students. So just looking at different ways to get that data to show the growth that you're looking for. We work with teachers on staff management. If you work in like a life skills classroom, like I did for many years, you could have anywhere from 1 to 7 or 8 paraprofessionals, and that adds a whole other dynamic to your teaching when you have that many people all crammed in one room. So we work with that. And there's also a very different level of parent communication that comes when you're working with children with special needs. And so making sure that our communication with parents is effective and purposeful. So.
And when we talk about working with teachers, we mean special education teachers, and we do work with general education teachers too, because there is a team for the child. And let's see here. Now we're going to talk a little bit about consulting. See the humor, thanks. So a lot of what we do is consulting. We do function under the coaching model, but some of what we do have to pull from our specializations because, number one, a situation could be a crisis situation and we need help ASAP. And two, because we're looking for different resources, or we're just offering that up front to the teacher. So Marissa and I, every week, we switch buildings and we have building level special education department meetings. So 1 week we'll be here, 1 week we'll be at the high school. We switch out, we send out an agenda for teachers, but we do allow them to bring topics to the table also. And we've had some good attendance at our meetings.
That's completely voluntary. We don't require people to come to them, but we have had very good attendance.
Right. The last few meetings we've talked about behavior data. That seems to be a popular topic, so we get a lot of questions about that. We work on problem solving with special education teams, which involves lots of members, as we mentioned earlier. We also are active members of IEP teams, just in general with some of the students. So we do go to a lot of meetings and we actively participate. We help with IEP writing and compliance checks, which really is good preventative work for us legally also. We have a lot of brand new staff and writing an IEP is difficult. So we do a lot of compliance checks. For teachers, we sit with them and go through IEPs, make sure we have everything that we need to.
All I's dotted and T's crossed.
Yes, for sure. We work on behavior modification strategies for gen ed teachers also. And we're also working on guidance through MTSS, and I did spell out a lot of our acronyms here because we like those in our jobs. So multi-tiered systems of support, processes or systems set up, which MTSS is, some of the buildings we call it RTI also. We do a lot of aid trainings and shadowings for them too, and that can be requests of the aide or the case manager, or sometimes administration does ask us to step in and do that also. And we also give building level presentations and just information sharing at the micro level also. A little bit more about consulting. Our IEP system, we use a sped track, and I'm just learning it because my last district we used something else, so Marissa's probably the better person for this, but we do help teachers with support in this area. We provide a lot of mental health and trauma education to teachers, support staff, parents, whoever requests it or where we see a need for it. We're building team members for PBIS, MTSS, and RTI at each school, which sometimes gets a little tricky trying to get to every meeting, but we attempt to be at those meetings to be good supports. Part of my job is completing functional behavior assessments for students. So that's learning about the function of a behavior, and that can be for students who are in gen ed or in special education also. And myself and other members of the team work on a behavior intervention plan for students, again, who might be in general education or special education. So that's a pretty big part of my job also, besides...
Quick question there.
Yes.
So is an FBA similar for behavior as an IEP is to education?
So an IEP is the overall plan for a student who's in special education. Students who have behavioral needs may need an FBA, which is just us looking a little bit closer at the function of the behavior to decide a plan for it. So what are we going to do if we know this child is displaying work avoidance? How are we going to address that?
So it's like a component of the IEP
Yes.
for some kids.
Okay.
Yes. Good question. Thank you.
Cheerleading. So some of what we do is also just cheerleading and kind of working on that staff retention. So a lot of times we attend IEP meetings just merely as support for staff. A lot of new teachers, it can be very intimidating to sit down at the table with parents who, have gone through this several times and know the IEP process very well. And so sometimes we were there just to help take notes, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly, because it's, like I said, it can be intimidating the first few times. Just observing in classrooms and giving positive feedback. We also do some crisis, like Lauren said, crisis assistance and some CPI stuff. So there are times when our phones are going off and there's a student who's having some issues somewhere in the district, and so we tag team in and out and decide who's going to go respond and help support that staff. We do a lot of collaborating. We are very lucky that our offices are right next door to each other, so we can collaborate with one another, but we also collaborate with people all over the district. We're meeting facilitators, so sometimes if a special ed teacher needs to have a co-plan meeting with a gen ed teacher and it's maybe not the best situation, or even in a good situation, but they feel like they just need some help getting that conversation going, we help facilitate that. But in general, just kind of rallying the troops to keep on going. So.
Right, and I just want to jump back real quick, sorry, to talk a little bit about that crises assistance. Sometimes Marissa and I can be called to a building and maybe we've missed what happened, but we help staff fill out the appropriate paperwork or remind them what we need to do legally to make sure that crossing our T's and dotting our I's. There are some times where we might need to stay in a classroom for a full day or a week or longer, depending on really what's going on with the student or the classroom. Sometimes there, are behavior issues that can be disruptive, or sometimes can be physical too. So they really need more one-on-one assistance to do that. So we'll talk a little bit about some of our goals here. We're really working on helping with MTSS and behavior. We have some great leaders in our building, and I know we're really working on beefing up that progression for MTSS and RTI, and we're working as supports for that. Marissa works a lot with curriculum development and alignment. Specifically this year, she's looking at life skills, special education programs, and aligning those. Marissa and I work closely with a new program at the junior high to address social emotional learning for kind of a pod of students. We're seeing that what we were providing them wasn't appropriate. So we did create kind of an SEL block for them where they're getting some supports for some learning skills. We'd like to work more in professional development for paraprofessionals also, and we're getting a lot of feedback from them about what they want also. And I think the great thing about Marissa and I, she's been in the district so long that she has a great rapport with a lot of the paraprofessionals already, and they know she has great experience. And I was a paraprofessional here also, so I can kind of fall back on that. So I think we really do well at rapport building with teachers and staff and paraprofessionals in general too.
They're such a large part of getting it done too, so that's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, nobody can do their jobs without them.
No,
Right.
they're so crucial.
We've also talked about some more special education training for substitute teachers and aides also, because again, they're a big part of what we do also. And we also work on encouraging evidence-based approaches and practices for behavior and trauma across the district. This is something we really want to work on in the future to our goals with the district's initiatives of responsive classroom and restorative justice, also, because we know that you can work really, really hard to do something, but we want to work efficiently and make sure we use evidence-based practices to do so. Okay, any questions?
You mentioned one thing that you do a lot of is behavior data. What is that in a nutshell?
It can look all different kinds of ways, lots and lots of different ways, and it kind of depends on what we're trying to capture in that moment. If we're trying to improve a student's communication goals, right now maybe they're acting physically aggressive to communicate, and we'd rather have them use their device like an iPad or a talking device to communicate. We might take data on how often they're using that device, or we might take data on how often they might be hitting staff. So that's kind of, one thing. That's typically something that would be in a student's IEP. I might go into a classroom and collect time on task data to see how often the student is attending to instruction, and that can be brought back to the MTSS table too, to talk about other interventions we can use for a student. Help me out here too.
Or just in general, if a teacher has concerns about a student's behavior, we may just start with like what we call an ABC chart, and we're just looking at what those behaviors are, what happens before, what happens after, to try to figure out what's going on. Just trying to analyze why a student might be struggling.
Right, and that's kind of initial data that I use when I'm working to create an FBA and then a behavior plan for a student, that to make sure it's actually going to be something effective. We know the function of the behavior. I work, and Marissa does really hard on setting up data systems for teachers so they can collect data for a student's IEP, or for, like I said earlier, anything that we need to bring to the MTSS table also. So we can be taking data on how often a student does something, or how often they're asking for help. It just really depends situationally. But we know that we do need to have data
To make our decisions.
yes, to make our decisions. And teachers are great, and I know you guys talked a lot about teachers not having much time. A lot of what I do is help them set up systems to do that, and we need to make sure that we're able, to use those systems that we set up. So a lot of times I'll come in a few weeks later to make sure that we're still taking data the same way. I might take it for a few minutes or a day to kind of look at the validity of the data we've been collecting also.
How has behavior management changed? You've been here 15 years, you've probably seen a change in how we're to address behavior. I won't say just bad behavior, because certainly we can have both, but how has that changed?
I truly think that we have more and more systems that we have to put in place, because we're just seeing more and more mental health in our schools. So I think that how you respond to behavior is kind of dependent upon where it's coming from. And so we have to always look at it from the standpoint of, is this behavior communicative? Is it a sign of trauma? Is it a side effect of mental health concern? So we have to really kind of dig in the weeds and take data so we can kind of figure out what is the best way to approach helping this child. And I feel like in the last 15 years, we're seeing more and more kids in our district who are coming to school with more trauma or mental health and those kinds of things, and it's just societal. I mean, I don't think it's just here, but I think that's, in the course of my career, I'm seeing more of that.
And I think a lot of what Marissa and I do, you guys talked about culture change also. The way that some people might approach behavior might not be appropriate for a student who has mental health issues or trauma issues. So we've been working a lot with gen ed teachers and special ed teachers about some approaches to do that are effective, because sometimes more punitive things aren't going to be effective if a student is seeking attention, or if that punitive thing just really doesn't mean much to them. So we're really working on that culture change also. And students who might have disruptive behavior, what we call bad behavior, they can be challenging, and so we really work hard to support teachers and let them know that we're working as a team too, because it does get frustrating when a student is with you the majority of the day and you have challenges. So I would say Marissa and I don't get too much resistance for our help. We have some good job security in that sense, so.
You had a bullet on a slide about more professional development for the paraprofessionals. In light of what we just heard earlier tonight, how does coaching play a role in that?
Some of what we've done this year is a lot of like shadowing. And so if we've had some paraprofessionals who don't start at the beginning of the year. So that's challenging, right? Because you come in and systems are set up, and we decided that we need another staff member to help with whatever reason, and they've had no experience because, you know, a lot of our paraprofessionals don't necessarily come with it from an education background. And if you're a paraprofessional, you're likely working with kids in special education, which come with their own set of challenges. So what we do is often it's me, sometimes it's Lauren, but I will walk around and I will follow that person through their schedule for a day or a half a day or, you know, whatever works best, and just kind of give professional development as we're going through the process. So, you know, if they're working on a lesson with the kid, I might say, you know what, let's try doing it this way. And I will model what that instruction should look like. Or I will model what kinds of language to use with a child, or how to use that communication device with a child. And then I check in with the case manager and see how things are going and if I need to come back. So currently that's what it looks like. We would love to see more of that at the beginning of the year, kind of front loading some of that moving forward. But anything else?
Well, thank you to all four of you. We are so fortunate to have you in the district, and I just want to say thank you to the board for your support in either, you know, adding or entrusting the administration and kind of changing and shaping these positions. I think I've seen in just, you know, 11 weeks of school that this model and having coaches in place has just had a really positive effect and will continue to do so. And I think Kim made a great point, is that once teaching peers see their colleagues engaging in the coaching cycle and reaching out and seeing that it's a non-threatening and trusting kind of relationship, that we'll just continue to see this take off. I think we already have incredible data on peer observations. That right there is a shift. I mean, just generally speaking, teachers are not used to going into other teachers' classrooms very often, especially at the secondary level. I can say that because I was a high school teacher a long time ago, and you generally just kind of shut your door and do your thing. And so this idea of just being open to each other and sharing your expertise and your experiences, but also sharing your failures and your mistakes, that's how we all grow. So truly, the four of you are leaders in our district, and just appreciate you being here tonight, but all the work that you do as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel smart. Where's that song? Well, at this time, no closed session is needed. That hasn't changed, right? All right. Is there any further discussion tonight? Seeing none, I need a motion to move back into open session.
So moved. No,
I'm sorry, motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we're done.
To be done.
See?
We need Max back. So move.